What is up, everyone? Finally back after a long layoff. Today we're going to be going over UFC 306, Merab versus Sean O'Malley. This is a 10-fight card, and we have two 5-round fights, the main event and the co-main event. Let's just go ahead and hop right into it. As far as the slate context, like I just said, 10-fight card, two 5-rounders. It just means that it's going to be very difficult to get unique. But I do have a few ideas on how to do that we'll get into later. But let's just go through each fight, and I'll give my opinions on it from a DFS perspective, and we'll go from there. So, first fight we'll go over is Raul Rosas Jr. versus Aorileng. Raul Rosas, he has the exact style you're looking for on DraftKings for MMA, just takedowns, control, and finishing ability as well. You can see even in his UFC fights so far, decision sub, and then that kind of outlier easy matchup in Mitchell where he got a KO in the first minute, I believe. But usually he's looking to go in there, get takedowns, control you, and then look for a submission. And when he does that, he's scoring like 100 plus every single time. And here he's an 8-1 favorite with I imagine a very good ITD line. Yeah, minus 360. What's he in round one? It's like plus 175 in round one. It's not bad. And I think you have to leave him in play for DFS, even at 9.7K. And then his opponent, Aorileng, he's just not winning that often. He's plus 600. And it's not like if he wins, it's going to be, I guess if he wins, they're basically saying if he wins, it's going to be by finish about 90% of the time or so, which is actually not bad. But he's still an MME play only. I wouldn't touch him in any lineups below maybe 100. So Rosas is a clear side here for DFS. Next up, we have Yazmin versus Ketlin Souza, I believe. Let's take a look. I don't think this fight will look all that good for DFS. Souza, for starters, she's just not winning that often. And I don't think her ITD line will be anything worth mentioning. Yeah, plus 1,000. And Yazmin plus 220 as a pure striker in women's MMA. Like her decision wins. She's scoring 70 points, so that's just not going to cut it at 9.2K. This fight, it's MME only. Probably Uruguay is the slightly preferred side if I'm playing MME, but this fight is pretty much a pass for most contests, I would say. Then we have Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovics. Daniel Zellhuber, I don't think will look all that great from a DFS perspective. He's a lengthy striker. He kind of likes to pick you apart from the outside. And we can see in his last fight, he did that. He had a lot of volume, and he still only scored 80. And that's just the reality in DraftKings with these pure strikers. You can land a lot of volume, and you just won't score that well. So I'm going to need to see a really good finishing line from Zellhuber in order to be interested in him here. And he's plus 200. 9K, that's not great. So he's pretty much a pass. And then Ribovics, like plus 550. It's not great either, but he does have, I guess, some takedown upside. And he will bring a pace, I guess is the best way to describe it. So I don't know. I think I'm leaning towards a dogger pass here in DFS, but both sides look a bit fishy. Then we have Joshua Van versus Edgar Chairez. Joshua Van, 8.9K. And he is minus 235. The pricing makes sense for these odds. Joshua Van, another guy who's kind of a pure striker. I mean, he has a couple takedowns here and there, but he likes to box. He can be very high volume at times. You can see he has that volume upside. And, on a median basis, like this 80 is probably how he looks in most fights, I would imagine. But he has had some very solid performances lately where he's put up some big scores. But nonetheless, let's just go back to the metrics for this specific fight. Joshua Van plus 250 ITD. Once again, it's not great for this price. Edgar Chairez plus 450. I guess it's fringy for a 7.3K fighter. This is another fight where I probably lean towards the dog in DFS, but both sides are very fringy. Then we have Diego Lopes versus Brian Ortega. This fight should have a lot going on. Both guys are grapplers. Both guys fight at a high pace. Diego Lopes, he's been a fantasy monster throughout his career, mostly. And Brian Ortega, on the other hand, also has some decent upside in his wins. So I think this fight should deliver. And let's take a look at the ITD lines. Brian Ortega plus 350. Yeah, it's okay for 7.5K. And then Diego Lopes plus 160. It's pretty strong. So I think this is the first fight that I'm going to want both sides of, and I would probably play one of these guys in most of my lineups, if not all of them, if I'm in 20 or below. On to the next fight, Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Ode Osbourne. Ronaldo Rodriguez minus 145 all the way up at 8.6K. So I guess there's a tiny bit of line value on the Ode side. What is he, 7.6K? So a touch of line value on the Ode side to start off. And the ITD lines, Ronaldo Rodriguez like plus 180. That's pretty solid for, what was he, 8.6K? Yeah, I mean that's very, very reasonable. Ode Osbourne plus 250 or so. I think Ode, yeah. So I think this fight looks good on both sides. The one thing I could see happening is I don't think people will want to play Ode Osbourne just because I think he's coming off a 3-fight losing scare. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. People just aren't very high on him at this point in his career, but he certainly looks like a reasonable play here, and I don't think you can just ignore him because of narrative reasons. I think you got to get to both sides of this matchup, and that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Then I believe we have the main event. So, main event, Merab versus Sean O'Malley. Most of us already know Merab's story. He's like, I always like to separate like DFS fighters into tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier. Merab's a tier 1 DFS fighter. It's just nonstop pace, nonstop wrestling, control, strikes, total strikes, significant strikes, total strikes. He does it all. And I mean, you won't see a fighter that puts up numbers like he does almost every fight. There's all the fight was a dud, but it's very rare. And in this matchup, he has 5 rounds to work with. It's just, you can never say for sure, but like if Merab wins here, he's optimal. He just like 99% of the time he's optimal when he wins here, and he's about 47% or so to win, and that's just he's 7.7K. It's just a play that you're gonna want to have just a ton of. I don't know the exact percent I'll end up at, but I'm gonna get a ton of Merab this week. And then the O'Malley side, which is the more important side to talk about because everyone knows what Merab's deal is in DFS. He has the finishing upside in this matchup, especially early with a knockout. So I guess the round 1 line really isn't great, to be honest, but it's well within the range of outcomes. I mean, we all know how Sean O'Malley is likely going to win this fight. It's going to be by knockout, plus 110 by knockout, minus 130 money line. So a lot of his wins are going to come inside the distance, and a lot of those are going to come by knockout. So this fight looks great on both sides. It's going to be an ownership thing mostly. I want to see how that shakes out because O'Malley is obviously the more expensive fighter because he's the favorite, 8.5K. So I do want to see what ownership is like. But both sides of this look great, obviously. Let's move on. Irene Aldana versus Norma Dumont. This fight is, let's see. So, I mean, it's heavily expected to go all 3 rounds. And I doubt either fighter has a respectable finishing line, no. But the one thing I will say, I almost wrote this fight off when I took a first glance at it. But Irene Aldana, she can bring a pace. 145 significant strikes, 125. I guess this is kind of more of an outlier, to be honest, now that I'm looking at it more. But the upside is potentially there as a very low-owned play. And then the preferred side of this fight is probably Norma Dumont because she has this takedown upside. And yeah, I mean, that's about it. Just the takedown upside alone is kind of what makes her okay. If you get like a 90 score out of her at 7.8K, I think that's decent. And this fight's going to be low owned, I imagine. So it's probably a pass on the Aldana side. And I have a little bit of interest at low ownership for Dumont. But overall, the fight looks pretty weak. Then we have the other 5-rounder, the co-main event, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina Shevchenko plus 120 underdog. Alexa Grasso, minus 140 favorite. This fight's, let's see, about minus 180 to go all 5. So I'm just going to, who has the finishing upside? Alexa Grasso by a good amount. Okay. So I'm just going to analyze this, assuming it goes 5 rounds. And so let's look at their first 2 fights. Obviously, Grasso won the first one by a 4th round finish and put up a great score at 6.8K. Then the second fight, Grasso scored 94, and this was a draw, right? So no one got the 30-point decision win bonus. They both only got their stats. They didn't get any win bonus. So 94 for Grasso and 91 for Shevchenko. So, I mean, both of these scores on their own are like borderline optimal scores. To get 91 and 94 is incredible at 7.9K and what was it, 8.3K. So yes, from a DFS perspective, you want to get both sides of this. But the more important point I want to make, and I alluded to at the beginning of the video, as far as uniqueness, this is a very viable fight stack. Like, this is a very viable fight stack, especially on a 10-fight card. And I usually say, like, on a smaller card, you want to dedicate maybe 1 to 3 lineups to a fight stack, because even on those cards, it's still just not that likely. But on a card like this, like Valentina, okay, let's just assume that Grasso wins and scores like a 120, and Valentina loses in a decision and scores like an 80 to 90 points. Like, Valentina could outscore a lot of these underdogs, even if the underdogs win, right? And that's assuming they win. Obviously, she'll outscore all of these underdogs if they lose. So this is a fight stack I think you're going to want to target more than usual, especially if you really want to get unique in this type of slate environment. I think it's a very viable way to go. Last but not least, Manuel Torres versus Bahamondes. This fight should be an elite fight to target. You got it right smack dab in the middle of the pricing, which is a very easy fight to fit into lineups. 1.5 round line. Both guys have elite finishing lines, and that's pretty much all. I mean, I guess as far as the styles go, Ignacio is more of a pure striker, and Torres also is a pure striker, but he has like some grappling and takedown upside. It's not his go-to, but he has it in his arsenal. But nonetheless, I like both sides of this fight with no real preference. So I think that's going to be it. I guess the other thing I would say is I think the O'Malley and Merab fight is also a decent candidate for a stack. And I mean, I guess how would that work out? It would be if O'Malley won a striking-based, damage-based decision and put up like 100, whatever points he, like 100 something. And Merab was still getting takedowns during the rounds, but the judges just scored it a split decision for O'Malley, right? But Merab still put up a ton of fantasy points along the way. Then maybe a fight stack of Merab and O'Malley would get there. But to be honest, like, if it goes the distance, can Merab outscore Sean in a win? I mean, that's actually a crazy thing to think about. What if Merab lost a decision but outscored O'Malley in the fantasy department? I mean, I think that's weirdly possible in this matchup. So, yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, it's probably unlikely that the main event gets there in a fight stack, just because if Sean wins a decision, you're probably just going to need the Merab floor. And O'Malley, let's say he scores like 100 points in a striking-based decision, he could get outscored by a lot of guys around him. So, I mean, it's a hard thing to think about. That's why you kind of let SaberSim do its thing. But I guess the overall message I have is I wouldn't turn on don't use opposing fighters this week, because I think there's a lot of ways where a fight stack could get there this week. So that's going to do it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment or just message in the DFS PhD Discord. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next one.